Hello and welcome to the Car Canvas Reviews channel, and welcome to the 2025 Honda Prologue, electric car from Honda-ish. In today's video, we're going to do a proper technical review under the hood, because there is such a thing in this electric car. Under the car, inside and out, some things we like, some things we do not like, right after this. Let's start our technical review under the hood. And before we even start, I want to mention one thing. In case you saw the Honda Prologue part, folks, this car is made by GM. 100%, top to bottom, just the sheet metal in the body. So what we are actually going to be reviewing right now is a GM electric system from a Blazer EV. Let's get into it. In my opinion, electric cars are judged by how their thermal management handles things. Because in electric cars, you don't have a source of heat. You have to deal with weather extremes. What do you do to cool and heat the battery? And what do you do to cool and heat the cabin? That's the challenge with electric cars. Because if you just heat them up with heaters, the range is going to drop. So you have to find that perfect balance between the two to get a good range and good cooling heating for the cabin and the battery. With that, let's dive into this one. So this is GM's thermal management system. They actually call it BEV, which is Battery Electric Vehicle Heat 2.0. This is their second version of this system. Pretty impressive. And let's get into the details, because this is the first time that we review an electric car that has a pretty impressive thermal management system. Let's dive into it and you'll find out why. This car, unlike many electric cars that we've reviewed, has a 6-way coolant valve. Here's what the thermal management system will do when the car is too cold. You need to heat up the battery, you need to heat up the cabin. These systems need to scavenge any bit of heat from any source that's going to make it, to harness it and use it until things warm up. So in this system, because they have a 6-way valve, unlike BEV Heat 1.0, where they had multiple 3- and 4-way valves, this one has a 6-way valve. So this system will have two cooling systems. One for the motor inverter and the rear motor and inverter, and then one for the battery itself. It's dedicated to the battery. But these systems, because we have a 6-way valve, they can operate independently or they can operate together. Meaning, as the motor and the inverter start warming up, we can route some of that coolant that's gonna go to the battery through these components, harness some of that heat and send it to the battery, and vice versa. Or, when things are operating at good temperature and we're happy, they separate and things are operating individually. That is pretty cool. Now, in addition to that, they do have a cross between HVAC refrigerant and the coolant. But here's the interesting part. They use that both ways, so that they can take some of the hot refrigerant to warm up the coolant, which then will warm up the battery, or they can supercool the coolant to cool the battery using cold refrigerant. That is actually pretty interesting. In addition to that, they do have a heat pump system. A heat pump system is basically an AC system that is flipped, because in this car, you have to cool the cabin, and that part works exactly like any car, even gasoline cars with the AC. But how do you heat the cabin? You flip that circuit where the hot side is inside, cold side is out. And here's the interesting part about this. This heat pump system is pretty sophisticated because it has electronic expansion valves. And these are the valves that can block flow or restrict flow to flip the circuit. Here's the cool thing about this design of this. So inside the cabin, you have an evaporator for AC, just like any car that has AC. Then you have an inside, they're calling it a heater core, but it's actually an inside condenser. So we can send hot refrigerant to that to warm up the cabin. This, of course, does have a electric compressor. That's what runs the whole operation. In addition to that, though, there is one thing. Even though this has a 6-way valve and things are pretty sophisticated, they still have a coolant warmer, a high voltage coolant warmer in case things get very extreme and we absolutely cannot warm up that battery fast enough or kind of scavenge heat from multiple sources, that heater will come on and forcefully heat the coolant until things catch up. They do have that. However, at least the research on this car was very difficult because we're jumping between Honda and GM and Honda, back and forth, back and forth. This car does not appear to have a PTC heater inside. That is pretty interesting that they completely relied on the heat pump system to actually heat the cabin. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of the construction of this system, what it entails, in case you're not familiar with electric cars. So you have electric motor that drives the wheels, single speed. Nothing really fancy about that. If you have all-wheel drive, you have another motor in the back. On top of that motor, there is an inverter that kind of sends power, and then when you brake, that motor is going to be turned by the force of the road. It's going to switch the voltage around and start regenerative braking, charging the battery. In addition to the inverter, there's actually an onboard charger. Because here's how electric cars are. That battery is a DC battery. If you plug it in the wall in your house, that's AC. So that onboard charger is going to take that AC voltage, switch it to DC, and then charge the battery. So the capacity of that battery on this one is 11.5 kilowatt. That is actually about average for electric cars of this size. The battery itself is an 85 kilowatt hour battery. I feel like it's a little bit on the bigger side actually for a car of this size, which is pretty good. Then there is fast charging. So the cool thing about fast charging is we're not sending AC power to the car, we're charging it with DC already. So that basically, when you go to a station that has the fast charging DC, that bypasses the onboard charger and directly charges the battery. This car is capable of taking up to 150 kilowatt, which is about average for the industry in a car of this size and this price range. And with that, let's talk about some observations under the hood here. There is one thing that's truly impressive here: the lack of the coolant hose mess that we usually see in electric cars that has 17 different three-way valves, and this one connects to this one, connects to that one. You'll just have a sea of coolant hoses going everywhere. Not here. There is some coolant hoses, 6 coolant hoses going to that 6-way valve, but that compresses things and makes them compact and small because you have everything going to one place and exiting back to its component. You don't have the mess of one connecting to the other. That is truly impressive. I haven't seen a lot of electric cars other than Tesla that we have reviewed that had things this compact. However, unlike the Tesla octo valve that deals with coolant and refrigerant at the same time, this doesn't have that. That's why if you look on the other side of the compartment here, you will have a giant mess of HVAC lines. And if you really look into it initially, wow, that looks pretty complicated. It actually isn't. That's a typical setup of a heat pump system in a car. But here's what I love about it. See, most heat pump systems, you'll see a few lines going back and forth, but none of the components are visible. They're all buried somewhere. This one, I see the dryer, I see the expansion valves, I see a lot of the pressure sensors and whatnot. Everything is very visible. I love that part because should one of these components have an issue, you're not tearing half this car apart just to find it and test it or replace it or whatever the case. They're right there. I love that. This is how a heat pump system should be. I love that. Now with that, there is some interesting stuff. First one, let's get the good stuff first. Because the system is compact, the 12-volt battery is actually under the hood in a very normal spot when you expect it, very proudly displaying the AC Delco logo, and of course, like typical fashion of GM, has a little block on top of it. It's just how they do things. And with that, there is a few interesting stuff. First, I'll start, speaking of the battery, the ground cable. I don't understand why the ground cable kind of comes out, does this strange loop, and then goes and connects to a painted surface. Don't know what's that about, but what is worse than that is the quality of the coolant hoses. I'm pretty sure if we dig into this car, we will eventually discover the usage of a rubber hose, but everything I can see is plastic coolant hoses, and I mean everything connected to the 6-way valve is plastic. let me just translate that in case you are not familiar. Plastic hoses on a cooling system equals disaster waiting to happen. And this is the part where I just don't understand it. Just use hoses and clamps, because this plastic stuff, give this car a few years, they'll all start breaking and leaking, and you touch this broke and that broke, and it just turns into a big thing. That's the problem with that. And the overall kind of quality of things is what you expect out of a GM. It's not the top stuff. Not if you're a Honda owner and you expect certain quality of things, you're not going to find it here, because you're looking at a completely different company with a different philosophy here. That's a reality. But here's a couple interesting things. This one doesn't have a secondary hood release here. You actually pull the hood handle twice to pop the hood. And it has hood shocks. 2 of them. That's actually pretty impressive. You don't expect to see that in a car in this price range or this segment. That is pretty cool. Here's a missed opportunity, I feel like. Pretty sure there's a reason for it. There's no storage here. But I see a giant space right in front of the inverter, between the radiator and the inverter, for one. And if we push this inverter a little bit back, it will be even bigger. If we compress things and maybe tilt the radiator this way, you'll have a proper frunk here. Maybe you can cover this entire thing. Missed opportunity, because this system doesn't have the typical mess of coolant hoses all over the place. Do have the plastic hoses, but I feel like that was a missed opportunity, maybe in a future version of this car, at least on the GM side. Let's take a look underneath the Honda Prologue, not Honda Prologue. There's one thing I just gotta say. We look at a lot of cars, even not just the review cars. I mean, I'm a mechanic, I work in cars all day long. This is something small stuff. Let's just look at this. Now pay attention to this bolt. That is completely loose, so are these. Friday car, GM? Yeah, it's front's all covered. This cover, I actually do like the quality of it. I mean, it's not the flimsiest thing in the planet. We've seen some cars with real flimsy stuff, but it's all covered. I like that. There is the very annoying speaker. It just makes a very strange sound when you drive this. There's one here, one in the back. Let's look at the front suspension here. So this suspension, how should I put it? Unnecessary is the word I'm going to use. So you have these 2 control arms with ball joints. This ball joint is actually part of the knuckle, because why not? And then this ball joint belongs to this controller arm. Everything is aluminum here. And then you have the strut that kind of makes a very strange turn. And then it just sits there. And then there's an upper control arm, which is also aluminum. So it's the knuckle, so it's everything else. And then we look around here, 2 piston caliper. And then we get to the small details, the stuff that makes me wonder. So look at this brake line, this brake hose, sorry. You have line, crimp, hose, crimp, little piece, crimp, hose, crimp. Why can't we just make this a little bit less complicated than that? I honestly don't know. And then we look at the axle, inner side is not painted. This one is. That is okay, at least the middle part is painted. It is a pretty beefy axle. The sway bar links are plastic inside. It's just how they do these. You notice there's no cotter pins, because this is, of course, GM suspension. You can clearly read GM here. This is the, yeah. There's no cotter pins because these nuts have a nylon thing at the top, so they're one-time use. Then we look at the battery. This is one of the stranger ones that we've seen. So when you look here, this is actually similar sheet metal that they use for the body. I'm pretty sure it's reinforced underneath it, because you see the seam sealer here. But here's my favorite part, absolute favorite part. So we put the seam sealer here, and that's very nice application. Love it. But the problem is, why do we exactly put it here when there's holes and then the front is wide open? I don't really know. What's the point of that? And same thing here. Yeah. We put the seam sealer here. This is open and this is open. So what does that exactly do? I'm not really sure. I like that the lift points are somewhat normal on this car. You do have a little cutout here in the battery frame that allows you to lift this car. It does have a regular pinch weld. You do not want to lift it, for example, here, because you could crush the frame. But here, that is a designated lift spot, so they are normal. You don't have to pull panels or whatnot. Then we get in this area, I feel like there's this perfectly sized cover for a fuel tank, but there is none. Wonder if at some point they designed this as a gasoline car and then they changed their mind. Doubt it, because it already has the mounting. But here's the interesting part of the battery before we move on to the back. Look here. This is where you can see it. Do you see how the sheet metal is similar? It's similar sheet metal to the body and the battery cover. Pretty sure there's a reinforcement inside, because that's, if this gets scraped and it's just sheet metal, this is going to get damaged. So this is an interesting observation. Usually they'll have a different like material or whatnot. Let's look at the rear suspension here. So there's a few steel control arms. The knuckle is aluminum. They have this strange style axle with like a small boot. And we look here. This is where every Honda Prologue and equally the Chevy Blazer EV comes with a guitar string. 2 guitar strings actually. There's another one that just I wonder. Now I understand that the suspension now is fully extended, so this is tight. But why is it that way? Isn't that it, when you go over bumps, every time you go over bumps, this is going to get tight, and especially here is what I'm worried about. It's going to get tight and then loose. Why couldn't we just, I don't know, make this line maybe come out of here and then this will be relaxed? Just a small thought for the fine folks that designed this car. And then this one, this part I don't get. Why do we have a wire for the parking brake actuator, which is right here? Why do we have it part of the control arm where it's just going to be up, down, all the time and this long of a wire? Couldn't we just, I don't know, make it go alongside the brake line so it's shorter and save you a few bucks? Yeah, I don't really know. Then we look at the rear unit right here. This is an all-wheel drive model here. That's the rear unit. Inverters on top of it. The axles not painted on the end, but the surprising part is they are small axles. Usually electric cars will have really heavy-duty axles. These are on the smaller side. Not an issue, but here's that other guitar string. It's interesting. Buy a car, you get 2 guitar strings. Everything else is pretty well covered. This cover, I like the quality. This one, I don't know what happened here. I mean, it's sturdy, but just, I don't know. This one didn't get the love of the rest of the covers, which are actually really nice. Everything is covered in the back. Here's that other annoying speaker. This is all electric cars. They'll just kind of a proximity monitor, so you can hear the car coming close when you're at slow speeds. But this one is a little bit on the too loud side. Let's take a look at the outside of the 2025 Honda Prologue, or what I like to call the Honda part, because they did design the outside body. Of course, they had to. I think this does look like a good car, especially in this particular color. It's not a bad looking thing. It does have a slight spaceship look to it, but the rest is kind of like a box. I like that part. So Honda logo right here, and 360 camera here. The radar sensors all the way at the bottom. I like that they kept things relatively simple. Doesn't look like a lot is going on. You do have very little, very minor line in the hood, and there isn't a lot going on. You do have fog lights at the bottom, and that's about it. I like it. They kept it simple. The side, I really like these wheels. Although I know this is not a Honda wheel per se, they just chose the design because that is a 6-slug wheel. Usually you don't find those on Hondas. Really like that. Really like that this is actually painted, not just black plastic. The side profile, they really kept it super simple. Super simple because they had to fit it to this body. So here's a few observations though. First, the glass. If we pay our attention to that, usually car manufacturers will very proudly announce their name on the glass. Well, this one doesn't say anything. Doesn't say Honda, doesn't say GM, doesn't say anybody. Just leave it at that. I like this quarter glass, gives you a little bit of visibility this way, which is nice. Doors are super simple. There's only one faint line that starts here and goes to the back. Here's something I do like about this. You have a button to lock and unlock it, but you also have it in the back doors. In this segment of electric cars, you rarely see that, and that is actually pretty cool. I like that the windows, they didn't cut this to make some weird design. They left it big. I like that. Although you do have a lot of real estate here, but it is a window that you can see out of. Then we wrap around the back. I do like the back of this car. Looks normal, not over the top. Normal tail lights. I like how Honda is written here in a interesting font. Although they put that in the one car that doesn't. Anyways. Prologue Elite, which is the trim. And all-wheel drive, I get that because you could have this rear-wheel drive, although not in the Elite. And then I don't exactly know what this is. It says E, 2 dots, electric car maybe. Moving on. Tiny little wiper that if you own a GM, this looks super familiar. And let's look at the back door here. It's power, very loud. Let's look in the back space area here. It's actually a decent space. This is a little bit curved, so it does take a little bit. The wheel well intrusion is visible, but overall it's a decent space. I like that they put 2 bright LED lights here so you can really see everything. Now here's an interesting thing about these seats. You can't fold them from here. However, you can fold them from here down. But watch this. When you clip the seat, you have 2 positions to clip it into. This is one, and this is the other. I just thought that is actually pretty interesting. Let me fold the other seat. You guys can get an idea of the size here. Same thing on this seat with that. It's a pretty decent size. I actually like it. I think this is a pretty usable space, pretty simple seats to fold, and you have 2 positions for them. And here's how those 2 positions happen. If you look here at the latch, which is body painted, body color, you have one position here and the second position here. So that gives you those 2 positions. That's actually a pretty interesting design. Let's look here. We got some storage. Of course, it doesn't have a spare tire. Some storage here, some pretty deep well here because you don't have a muffler or exhaust, so they can make that happen. The back door, it is electric. You only have a single motor. That one is just a shock. It does go through the headliner. I wish that was not the case. And things are... okay, we got to talk about this. You run this. Why can't we just run this hose through this down? Yes, that was too much, but you have the washer hose right here. Right, very visible. And this door only has one button to close it. Here's an interesting thing about this door. It's super loud. Not when it comes down, when it actually latches. Let's take a listen. Once, there we go. Just takes a second. Listen to that. That's pretty loud. This is not going to affect the functions, but just I want you to observe something. Watch this panel, how it completely does not sit straight, where this is higher than that. That sticks further down. Now let's go look at the other side. Huh. This one is the opposite. This part sticks out more than this one. Fit and finish on this is not great. I mean, you look here, this gap starts normal, and then slowly start getting smaller toward the end. And then we look at this one. What exactly happened here? That's a giant gap here. We could have just extended that plastic piece a little bit just to make it a little neater. That's okay, we can live with that. But another thing is, battery dies. This car has a 12-volt battery, in addition to the big battery. Battery dies, for whatever reason. Well, how do you get in the car? Oh, well, the key has a metal thing where you can... Well, where do you put the key? I don't understand why manufacturers do this. They put a cover on top of that because how bad your image would look if your electric car has a place to put the key. So we had to cover it. And then you'll be fighting with this for a while to get it out. And then eventually, as the car gets older and this gets brittle, it'll break. And now you have to go buy another... Why? Just put... I don't get why manufacturers do this. Then the charge door. Let's do the flimsy charge door test. I was trying to say it's not as super flimsy. There's no other way to say it. So this does have fast charging and regular charging. Something interesting here, where is my light? There's no light here. And I wish all electric cars have that. Some do, some don't. And we'll talk about the range in a little bit because that's a whole different thing. Let's take a look at the interior of the Honda Prologue. If you are a Honda owner and you are considering this car, when you step in it, it'll feel completely different than any other Honda. Because, welcome to GM. This is a completely different car, folks. And here's what I have to say about this interior. It's not a bad place to be in. Very comfortable seats. The gauges, while it's a screen, and I usually don't like screens, but this one, you could display the map. Doesn't have a lot of functionality, but other than that, I can live with that. The infotainment system, it feels like a giant plug. It just kind of sticks out from the dash, very awkward angle, and it feels very generic. It almost feels like somebody, let me think about this, designed it for their own car and just kind of deleted half the stuff and just plugged it into another car. That's how it feels like. It's exactly what it is. The HVAC controls, they're all physical button. And I like that part. The center console area here, pretty wide open. You have storage underneath. I feel like this part is probably the nicest thing about this interior. The steering wheel, nice leather on it, but the button situation, it's the GM thing. I mean, this entire section have so many buttons that I'll be honest, I have no idea what they do, if they do anything. And you have controls in the back. Just feels like we could have consolidated this, just like every other car out there. However, on this one, you do have an option for one pedal driving. You can select it, normal, heavy, or off. But you also have a button here that you can press and automatically send it on heavy, on demand if you have it off. That is actually pretty cool. Some electric cars will do that, so you can use it on demand when you need it. And as far as fit and finish and quality of materials, the materials are all right. That's the best thing. Same thing with fit and finish. I mean, this is a typical GM interior. It works. Functionality-wise, it works pretty good, but don't expect high-end and perfect razor-sharp fit and finish. It's not, folks. But it is a comfortable place to be. It's decently quiet. But here's my problem. If you're a Honda owner stepping into this doesn't feel like any other Honda. You're used to that solid Honda interior. It doesn't feel like that. It just simply doesn't. And for the price these command, this one as tested is $56,000. Leaves a lot of room for improvement. Let's put it this way, because unfortunately this car has a slight badge tax. That's what we're going to call it. So that's one problem. And the next problem is the car that this is based off of, the Blazer EV. It actually has a much nicer interior. Here's a picture of that. The only thing that potentially may be a downside is some of the HVAC controls are in the screen in the Blazer EV. This one has all physical button. That's about the only thing, but you don't have this plug of a screen here that just completely feels off, honestly, it have to be said. Let's take a look at the back seat of the Honda Prologue, also known as the Blazer EV. This is my driving position. I'm 5'7". It's a lot of room. There's one thing about GM, folks. They know how to make a comfortable car. It has to be given to them. This is a very comfortable back seat. Very comfortable. You don't expect it in a car of this size. The floor is flat. I love that part because it is electric. Super comfortable back seat. You do have some USB-C here. You do have a household style outlet here. This does have a pano sunroof, and even with that, there is decent headroom. I think if you didn't have that, you'd have a little bit more headroom. It's a very comfortable place to be. Fit finish though, could be bad. That's the reality of this. But at least it's a very comfortable place to be in. Let's talk about some things I do not like about the Honda Prologue, and this one is a very easy one. The whole thing, flat out. This is possibly one of the biggest heartbreak moments for Honda enthusiasts and owners when they want to buy an electric Honda, because they entered into the box checking. We're going to check a box We made an electric car by borrowing one from somebody else. Let's just take their car, put a body on it, change the tuning of the suspension slightly, and let's go. And the reality is, it's actually a decent car. The truth have to be said. It's not a bad car. It's not a bad electric car. But wouldn't you rather buy it from the people that actually put the effort behind it to design it than the folks that just took the car, slapped a body on it, and let's go and check a box? I would. So, the 2025 Honda Prologue is going to go on deaf ears, but I'm going to say two things. This is probably the lowest ranking Honda in my list by a couple miles. And the second thing is, this is the biggest disappointment Honda vehicle I have ever been in. Not because it's a bad car, it's actually not, but because of what we're going to talk about right now. See, it feels like lately, all manufacturers, they want to have an electric car. Some of them are pretty serious at it. They really put a lot of effort to make a good electric car, and they're trying very hard. Some manufacturers, they just want to check a box. We got an electric car. Here it is. Let's move on with our lives. Unfortunately, Honda is joining Toyota in checking a box. Because Toyota's electric car, the bZ4X, is easily the worst electric car to buy in 2025 by a mile. Because they didn't care. They didn't put any effort into it. It's horrendous on every level. Because they just want to check the box. But at least Toyota actually put a slight effort into making their electric car. It's horrible, but hey, they made it with Subaru, but mostly they made it. Honda, however, they just wrote a check to GM. Can you just make us an electric car, put a body on it, let's send it. And here's an interesting part. This is actually a decent car. It's not a bad electric car. Even technology behind it, yeah, it does have some shortcomings. Of course, nothing is perfect, but it's a decent car and decent platform and a decent electric system. But here's my biggest problem with the Honda Prologue itself. I feel like when you get into this or you consider this, you're paying a slight badge tax, is what I'm going to call it. Because what is equivalent to this in the GM world is a Blazer EV. And when you buy this, you're kind of at a loss from every direction. First, you're paying the badge tax, so this is more expensive than the Blazer EV, which this is based off of. At the lower trims, it is more expensive. At the higher trim, it is more expensive. That's the first problem. Second problem, this gets lower range than the Blazer EV, which they're basically the same car with the same system. I don't know why they get different range. And here's the most interesting part about this. This is actually a decent electric car. It's not the best, but it's definitely not the worst. It's decent. It has a lot going for it. But would you rather buy that car from the people that actually put the effort behind things and actually made this car? The technology behind it, the interior, everything around it? I would. And the best part is when you do that, you actually get a better price, more range, and when you actually need something and take it to the dealership, they will not be running left and right to avoid you because you're taking a GM to a Honda dealership, basically. That's the reality of this. And for me, the biggest thing is, here's the interior of the Prologue one more time. And here's the interior of the Blazer EV. But actually, the Blazer EV looks nicer. So you're paying more for a car that is not from this manufacturer, that gets less range, and the original car, it looks nicer on the inside. Maybe the outside, I really do like what they did with the outside here. Why would anyone do that? That's the problem. They are checking a box. And they did. Didn't even put any effort. Yeah, they designed the body, but wouldn't you rather get the original one from GM? It's actually not a bad car. It's a decent car. I'll leave that one up to you. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.